Hey everybody, welcome back to Ironman. We're starting a new series today on encouragement. It's one of my favorite things in life, and probably for some of you guys too, is to be encouraged. And I actually enjoy encouraging people too, because it makes me feel good as well. But the Bible actually has a lot to say about encouragement, and I was kind of surprised as I started looking into it how much the Bible really does say about encouragement, how we should be encouraging each other. I want to start off right away with the verse that we're going to use. It comes from Hebrews 3:13. It says this, "Encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness." So I want you to just think about that for a second. If you have the outline that I've emailed some of you guys that are on our men's list, and just to underline it, encourage one another daily. This is something that's super important for all of us. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, I got a note from a guy who it was super encouraging. And he didn't say that much. He just said, "Hey, I love the message tonight. You know, you did a really good job talking about this or that." I can't remember what it was, and it was really helpful to me this week. It was like something really small, but it was really something that was great to get. And then just before I went in to speak the next time, I was on the phone with a friend of mine who used to be a missionary over in Malawi with me. And every time we talk on the phone, we laugh and laugh, and it's just, it's just nonsense stuff that we talk about. But the point is that, I feel good when I talk to him on the phone. And then right at the very end, he said, "Oh, hey, by the way," and he lives in another state now. He said, "I've been watching your messages each week," and he said, "You're doing a great job with that stuff, man. Just keep up the good work." He says, "You've got an easy way about you of connecting with your guys. I love it." Something like that. And it made me feel so good. When I came in and spoke the next time, man, I felt like, I was a professional at this or something. But anyway, those kind of things are very important. And then when I started thinking about it, I thought, why is it so important? Like, why do we love to be encouraged so much? And it comes right out here in the Bible that we actually need it. It's important for the church. It's important for Christians to encourage each other. God doesn't merely recommend it, he actually commands it. I want to read this from 1 Thessalonians 5:9-11. It says this, "For God did not appoint us to suffer wrath, but to receive salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ. He died for us so that whether we are awake or asleep," in other words, whether we're dead or we're alive and living with Christ, "we may live together with him. Therefore," verse 11, "Therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing." So, in other words, they're already encouraging each other, and he's saying, keep it up. Keep up the good work. Keep encouraging each other because it's important. When my dad was alive, he was a pastor of a small church up in Michigan, and he had a local column that he wrote in the newspaper called "Encouraging Words." And it was a small little paper. It's probably kind of like the Penny Saver or something like that. And he had a little column once a week that I think he actually paid for. I'm not sure if the church paid for it or he paid for it personally, just for that spot, so he could write an encouragement to people. And he actually had a really good following of people who read his encouraging words. And it always had Bible verses and little stories and things like that in it. But I love that was important to my dad, was to encourage other people. And hopefully I've gotten a little bit of that from him. But I want to go through a few points here. And the first one that I want to talk about is why we need encouragement. Well, the Gospel of John says this. Jesus warns us, chapter 16 in John, he says, "In this world you're going to have trouble." He says, which is then followed by the encouragement, "But take heart, I have overcome the world." So Jesus knows we're going to have a hard time in this life. But then he follows it right up with an encouragement. Jesus is a great encourager, but take heart. I've overcome anything that you're going to have troubles with, anything that you're stressed about. So we are promised these things, these three things we are promised, and these aren't really good promises that we dwell on much, but we are promised as Christians suffering, persecution, and trials of various kinds. Yeah, and I know that doesn't sound very encouraging to you right now, and I'm trying to make this as encouraging as possible. but we are going to go through those things. But the good news is that we can encourage each other through those with words from the Bible and words from Jesus. As he encourages us, we can encourage other people. I was talking to some guys this week, some younger people on our staff, millennials, if you want to call them such, about social media, right? And I have this theory that at the very root, at the very simplest form, social media is all about people wanting encouragement. They post things that they want to get likes on, they want to get loves on, they want to get expressions, emojis and things like that. They want people to say, hey, look, man, what you're doing is cool. What you're doing is important. I'm jealous of you. You matter, and people, unfortunately, base a lot of their self-worth and their self-value on how many likes they get and those kind of things. But at its basic core, Facebook, Instagram, and all those things are all about people saying, hey, I need some encouragement here. Now, that might sound kind of superficial, but that is the world that we live in right now. So let's look at it from a different perspective. Let's say I'm scrolling through Facebook and I got a friend of mine who has posted something, and it's okay. It's not that big a deal to me. But I see that he's got no likes. Okay? It can be an encouragement from me just to hit like, okay, for him. It's like, okay, good. Finally, somebody agrees with me. Somebody likes what I put out there. And if you're like me, you've got some friends that are on there that, they'll put up anything, a picture of their dog eating, and it's got like 500 likes. And then you got somebody who'll put up something that's actually really meaningful, and nobody will respond to it. And, I feel sorry for those people. So I always try to encourage them with a little like or something. My cousin's the best at that. She lives in Missouri, and anything I post or anything that other people post, she just must sit there all day going like, heart, heart, heart. But she's a great encourager, and she oftentimes makes little comments too. And I love that about her. So keep it up, Sherry. But when we look at our church, let's go back to the church for a second, and encouragement is absent. Okay, so I want you to think about this for a minute. How do you feel when you're not being encouraged? How does your life feel when it's void of encouragement? Well, and let's think about it in the church sense. So if you come to church, you come and go, and nobody speaks to you or anything, you feel, number one, you feel unloved. Secondly, you feel unimportant. The next one, you feel sort of useless. And the next one is you feel sort of forgotten. And I would imagine that because we're not meeting together these days, that a lot of us feel these things. We probably feel unimportant because people aren't reaching out to us. We feel like we've been forgotten because, I'm part of this big church and no one has reached out to me, and I must be useless. And so, Satan starts giving these he starts attacking us with these things. So it's very important for us to go through, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, go through our contact list and encourage people. Look for people and pray for people that God can show you to encourage. And we're going to talk about that just a minute. But remember, Hebrews 3:13 says, encourage each other daily. Okay, daily. Not just when we come to church, and especially these days when we're not coming to church. We have to look for ways that we can encourage each other on a daily basis. So, what is encouragement? You might be asking yourself. Hey, Kyle, what is encouragement, you're asking? Okay, so it's defined as this. It is to give someone courage. Okay, that's one of the definitions, to give someone courage. Okay, someone is lacking courage. Someone is lacking the desire, the hope, whatever it is that they need in their life, you're going to come along, and the best way to give them courage, as we're going to see, is through Scripture. So biblical encouragement isn't about complimenting someone like on their haircut or saying what a good cook they are or whatever, although sometimes those kind of things, when you're reinforcing, when you want to reinforce good behavior, that's great. If your wife made a great dish that you love, you go on and on about it. You encourage her to cook like that again, right? Or if your son cleans his room, man, you're encouraging that. You say, yeah, keep that up, man. That's the kind of thing we want to see. So we're encouraging that, but that's not the kind that we're talking about here. The Scriptures talk explicitly about Christian encouragement, and I'm going to tell you two ways to do that. The first one is we're going to point out evidence in another person's life that's going to show them how God is using them. Okay, you're going to come to somebody and say, look, you may not like the job that you're in, but I bet God is using you as a light in that situation. At that store or wherever you're working, I bet God is really doing a number through you to reach people around you. That's a great encouragement right there. The second one is that it points a person to God's promises and reminds them that all of the problems that they're facing are under his control. Nothing is out of God's control. So that's two of the biggest encouragements that you can give them, to say, look, man, God's in control. He's got this. Okay, don't worry about things. You're coming along someone and giving them a scripture. Jesus says, don't worry about tomorrow. Let tomorrow take care of itself. Give somebody the gift of encouragement like that. I want to go through a couple of New Testament verses from the book of Acts. The Acts church is what we're going through on Sunday mornings, the early church. And the New Testament reveals that was a big part of the early church life. Acts 13:15 says, on the Sabbath, they, parentheses, Paul and his companions, entered the synagogue and they sat down. After reading from the law and the prophets, the leaders of the synagogue sent word to them saying, brothers, if you have a word of exhortation, in other words, if you have a word of encouragement for the people, please speak. Okay, so they are told to speak encouragement when they come to the church. If you've ever been on a missions trip overseas, and I've got lots of friends that will understand this, when you go to visit a church, the local pastor or elder will say, do you have a word of encouragement from your church in America? In other words, we want you to come and share. And I always warn teams when I'm the team leader or whatever ahead of time, make sure you've got a short message ready, because they are going to call you up to give a word of encouragement. But sometimes, missions teams, they can be a real encouragement to the local people. Sometimes they can leave a wake of destruction behind if they go there and they do things poorly. But oftentimes they are an encouragement to local missionaries that are on the scene, and they come and they bring supplies and they bring enthusiasm, and they come and hit it hard for a few weeks and then they leave. And that can be a great encouragement if it's done right. Back in 1990, I think it was 96 or 97, I went to the country of Ukraine, and I'm sitting there listening to these Ukrainian pastors, and they're talking in a foreign language, and we were, Ukrainian. That was the foreign language they were speaking in. And we were, it was myself and a few other guys. We were there to teach them how to use sports as a way to reach the community and kind of do outreach through sports events. And so we were getting ready to do our thing, and one of the pastors says through a translator, and he looks right at myself and my friend, who are the two younger ones. He said, would you two come up and give us encouragement through song? And I like gasped audibly, like, is this really going to happen? So my buddy, calm as could be next to me, he's super talented. He, in ways I didn't even know, he had been thumbing through a hymnal that was actually in English that I guess the Baptists had left behind when they had started this church. And he turns to me and he says, hey, do you know the song, How Great Thou Art? I said, yeah, I know the gist of it. So he goes, hey, let's go sing that. He said, I can play it on the piano. I'm like, wow. So we went up, we sat down on the piano, and we sang How Great Thou Art to a whole church full of Ukrainian pastors that were there for this workshop. So I don't know how encouraging that was to them. I doubt when I get to heaven one day, one of these old pastors is going to come up to me and say, hey, you really brought it with How Great Thou Art. It was such an encouragement. But you know what? God stretched us that night. It's a funny story, if nothing else. The next verse I want to tell you, Acts 18:24-27. Takes us in a different direction with encouragement. It says this, meanwhile, a Jew named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was learned, or he was an educated man with a thorough knowledge of scriptures. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with great fervor and taught about Jesus accurately, though he knew only the baptism of John. He began to speak boldly in the synagogue. When Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they invited him to their home and explained to him the way of God more accurately. Okay, so they're coaching him up a little bit. Verse 27, when Apollos wanted to go to Achaia, the brothers and sisters encouraged him and wrote to the disciples there to welcome him. one of the best ways that you can encourage somebody is when you see potential in them, okay, is to encourage them wholeheartedly to go for it. Okay, if you see somebody that's got a gift of speaking, help them get opportunities. If you've got someone who has got a gift of healing people, go join them, tell them to write their memoirs, something where you can encourage them along the way with that. But if you see someone's potential, especially you dads that have kids that have potential, don't thwart it, don't squash it. Come along and encourage it. Tell them how great they're doing, how great they're playing. One last verse I want to tell you or read to you. Acts 14, verse 21 and 22 talks about how they shared scripture as they were encouraging. It says, they preached the gospel in that city and won a large number of disciples. Then they returned to Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch, strengthening the disciples and encouraging them to remain true to the faith. In quotes, it says, we must go through many hardships to enter the kingdom of God. Okay, so it says they're encouraging them by saying, you're going to go through a lot of hardships. Okay, that's just what we talked about. Jesus is telling us you're going to go through a lot of hardships. They're quoting Jesus here. Okay, you're going to go through hard times, but remember, take heart, I've overcome the world. So as you encourage people, I really want you to take the opportunity ahead of time, if you know you're going to call somebody, have a scripture verse ready to share with them. So encouragement should not just be the activity that takes place at church, especially these days. Now that we're not meeting on Sundays anymore, we have to look for other ways to do that. So my last point I want to make is the third point, and how do I grow in being an encouragement to others? Maybe this isn't your gift. Romans 12 talks about the different gifts that we have, and being an encourager is one of them. Maybe it doesn't come naturally to you. Well, this is something that you can work on and that you actually should work on. So the first one is, how do I get better at this? Is pray for God to make you an encourager. Okay, God can give you this gift. Ask Him to have a heart for others. Ask Him to show you how you can pray for others. God delights in helping us obey His commandments, right? So if we've been commanded to be encouragers, like we read in 1 Thessalonians, if we have been commanded to do that, okay, then God's going to certainly give us the ability to do that. Okay, the second one, make encouragement a daily discipline. Okay, try to take the time every single day to go through your contact list, either email or text, and send at least one or two people an encouraging email every day. Let them know you're thinking about them. Just pick up the phone and call and do that. I got a friend of mine, Evan, who I'm going to interview here in a little bit. He's great at this. He'll just send me a text, hey, what's going on? Well, how's your day going? Just little things like that are such an encouragement. And the way it's encouraging is that somebody cares about you, that they're thinking about you. But send an encouraging note to somebody. If it's somebody that you work with or the same people you work with, that can be part of your daily discipline. The same people that you see over and over, that can be part of your daily encouragement. We have two young guys here that work at the church and the facilities, Ethan and Chandler, and these guys really have a job that I wouldn't want. They're constantly hacking down weeds on campus, or they're in some hot, sweaty place doing something. They're in a closet somewhere changing out air filters, and they move around together. And I always try to stop whenever I see them and spend a couple minutes with them and say, hey, man, you guys are doing a great job. And I used to oversee the facilities, and I know we've had some people in the past that didn't do as good a job. We've had some in the past that were good. But these two, man, they knock it out of the park every day. They come and they work extremely hard. And I try to take the time just to encourage them and say, hey, man, you guys are the best. You're the best we've had at this. So make it a daily discipline. The third one is pray for God to show you who you should encourage. Okay, just as you're walking around, say, God, who do you want me to encourage today? When I'm sitting at my desk, when I'm laying in my bed in the morning, who can I send a text to? Who can I send something funny to? It doesn't even have to be super spiritual. Just let them know that you're thinking about them. When I was getting ready to come back from South Africa to work in America, I was really praying that God would send me to the right position where I could make a difference. And I got hired by a high school in a small town in Mississippi to be their high school basketball coach. And I didn't really know the whole story of what I was getting into until I got there. And when I got there, I found out that the coach that had preceded me was very good. He'd won some state titles and things like that. So I had some big shoes to fill in that sense. But he was also very harsh with his players, yelled at them a lot, was verbally abusive to them, would call timeouts just to go out and berate them on the court and things like that, screamed at them a lot. So when I got there, I had a very talented but a very timid group of men, young men. And it was, I could see right away that God had brought me there to encourage these kids, and to help them see that basketball could be fun again, and that they mattered, and that their opinion and their input was important. So my coaching style was obviously different. I'd pull them aside on the bench, and we'd talk to them. We'd figure out what was going wrong, and we'd get them back on the court. I wasn't screaming at them. And one night after a game we'd won, and the local country music station who covered our games interviewed me afterwards and said, "Coach Ray, I noticed that you don't ever really yell at your players." And I said, "Well, I try to save my voice for yelling at the referees rather than at my players, He said, "Yeah, you don't get after your players." I said, "No, if I'm going to get after anybody, I'm going to get after them referees," So I said, "Look, I'm going to use my voice rather to encourage the players instead of berating them." Okay, that's how I'm going to coach, and that's how I coach the rest of the year. But I could see that God had used that prayer to come to a group of young men who needed that at that point in their life. The next one is use scripture if you're able. We've talked about that already. If you know a scripture verse that can encourage somebody, use that for sure. And be specific in how you encourage somebody. Don't just say, "Hey, you did a great job with that talk," or "Hey, pastor, you did a good job with the sermon on Sunday." Tell them what you liked about it. If somebody helped you at work in the office or on a project, say, "Man, you were really good. I could tell you really had done your homework. You were really organized." Reinforce that behavior, but really be specific with that. Which leads us into the very last one. Regularly encourage your pastor. And I'm not just looking at that as, encourage me, which of course I'll take. But I'm thinking more about the head pastor, the guys that are preaching on Sunday mornings. And if it's Palmer, or if it's Scott, or if it's Paul Gunther, whoever's up there, or if you're at a different church altogether from the Grove, send your pastor a text or an email on Monday and say, "Hey, I loved what you had to say. I love this story. I loved the way you unpacked this part of Acts," and be very specific about it. And you may not even get a text message or an email in return, and that's okay. That's not why you're doing it. You're doing it to encourage them. The other day, Josh Havens did a new song. I forgot. I can't remember what it was called. But I loved it, and I loved the words to it. When I saw him in the hallway the next Monday morning, I said, "Hey, man, Josh, I love that song, and here's why I liked it. I love the way, the words were like this and that." And you could tell, Josh is used to being on stage all the time and probably getting a lot of praise from people. He's got millions of viewers on YouTube watching the after videos. But you could tell he genuinely, stopped and appreciated the fact that I told him I like this song. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to encourage people. So with that, I'm going to issue you a challenge, and this is what we want to finish with today before I interview Evan here in a minute. What can you do this week to encourage people? How can you be an encouragement? It doesn't take much, okay? I know we all wish we had bosses that encouraged us more. We wish our spouse encouraged us more, but let's flip that on them. Let's be the one who encourages them. Okay, show them what encouragement looks like if you're not getting it. Encourage your children. Encourage people that are in your contact list this week. People from the men's group. People from, church who you haven't seen in a while. Say, "Hey, man, just checking on you. Haven't seen you in a while. Hope you're doing okay." Doesn't take much. That's your challenge for the week. We'll see you next week. All right, we're back with my good friend Evan Van Wagenen. In my contacts, he's known as Evan Soccer, because the first time I met Evan, he approached us somehow and was encouraging us to get a soccer league started up here. And if any of your kids have played in the Grove Soccer League, this is the guy that got it going. So
thank you,
Evan. Thanks for coming here.
Thanks for having me, Cal. I appreciate it. This is fun.
Well, Evan and I went to Liberia together. Gosh, probably a year and a half ago now or so. Time's really gone fast on that. And we just had a blast. We hung out on these long bus trips together, and just really kind of got to know him through that. ever since then, Evan and I have we've been friends. We've been in touch with each other off and on. I call Evan the beluga whale because I've learned that whales can hold their belugas especially can hold their breath longer than others and can go 20 minutes. So Evan and I will be rolling. We'll be chatting, text messaging, and then Evan, we call it going dark. He's going deep underwater, and I'll hear from him a month later. And then we have to play catch up. And
Now,
defend yourself now.
Yeah, is it my turn?
Yeah.
In my defense, I believe in the previous segment, Kyle mentioned that I was the one that reached out with texts and words of encouragement. So
That's
just to make
true.
sure
That's true.
Let's but it's irrelevant at this point. We're glad to be here, and I'm so happy to be here because I've learned a ton from Kyle, and obviously we all know Kyle's a great man and just a great leader, and both spiritually, personally, professionally. I mean, Kyle's meant a lot to me in my life and my family's life, and as has the Grove in my development. And we'll get into that. But yeah, just had to, the beluga part is funny though. I mean, I've put on some COVID pounds
It has
as well.
nothing to do with your weight.
No, I'm saying, but I have put on some COVID pounds. That's why I'm wearing black. But we got that going for us.
Okay, so Evan, you sat here, you listened to us go through the message. How important is encouragement to you receiving? And I know you're an encourager, which is the main reason, well, besides the fact that I like you and think you're a groovy guy.
Well, and somebody probably canceled on you, but other than that.
Which is true. Which is why I invited you at 10 o'clock last night.
Hey,
No,
that's
actually,
okay.
it's 6 o'clock this morning.
This morning, yes, that's okay.
Anyway,
Always glad to help.
you're a great encourager. Just talk about why encouragement's important to you to give and to receive it.
I just have always appreciated it when people went out of their way to encourage me in one way or another, whether it's, through just hey, you're doing a great job or whatever. Just that, not that I need the affirmation, but it definitely helps. Athletics have been a part of my life, and coaching and playing, and to me, obviously life, there's so many parallels with certain life skills and skill sets. And when you compare it to athletics and games and coaching and leadership, encouragement to me is the best way to lead. And that's the way I've always handled my business and my employees and associates and peers. Not just because it's the right way to do things, because it's the most effective way. And it's all boats rise with the tide, they say. So when you lift others up, you're lifting yourself up as well. So whether it's intentional or not, just when you get in that mindset of daily encouragement for others, and it doesn't have to be anything over the top either. It could be the smallest things. And with my children, my son Dane is 18, my daughter Brooke is 15, and I've always been their biggest fan, and for many reasons. Obviously, not just because they're my children, but because I love who they have become and continue to grow and develop spiritually and socially and professionally, and students, and they're just great human beings. At the end of the day, that's all we want to do is create great, God-loving human beings. And my children, through encouragement, I believe that's helped over the years as they develop in their confidence. And it's not like false confidence either. I mean, the things I tell them are real, and the things I'm proud of them
flattery.
for.
It's
Yeah,
legit,
because otherwise, it'd be like wallpaper if all you did, hey, great job on this and that, and when they don't do things the right way or they make mistakes, as we all do, and when I do, I won't bash on them. I'll be like, hey, here's some of the things you're doing great, and I love that. But here's some things that we could work on. So I think it's a balance where it's real and sincere and genuine. But throwing out text to people, and I love the idea of just going through your contacts, especially nowadays. These times are obviously unique for everybody. So to get that text from somebody you haven't heard from in a while, it means a lot. And to send those texts, it means a lot too, because clearly that will open up communication, and even going that next step, I know this is strange for the millennials, but actually calling somebody and reaching out and saying, hey, it's Evan, how you been? I was thinking about you the other day and want to just check in on you.
Yeah.
What's going on? Because I think that in and of itself will take it to the next level where you're having that interaction, which we all need so much nowadays. And the phone obviously is one of the safer forms of communication other than texting nowadays. So that's one of the things that I like to do is just reach out to people.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a lot. It's really simple.
It doesn't. So I want you to tell this story because you tell it pretty well. Well, I think you'll tell it well, but
a lot of pressure.
We were going on a hike in Liberia. We were going up this I want to say it was 4 or 5 miles.
Maybe 15 to 20, maybe, but no, it was probably 4 or 5
I
each
think
way.
it was 4 or 5
Yeah,
each
it
way.
was.
But it was a lot of work, and we were wearing jeans and long shirts because they said the weeds are going to scratch you, which they did. The paths were pretty narrow, and we had a pretty steep incline the whole way. And there were obviously I talked about this with Dion a while back, but there were students, women students carrying larger bundles than we were on their heads and in dress shoes and things like that.
Oh, like it's no big deal.
Yeah.
Balancing
And
them on their head.
it was literally 90 degrees and 100% humidity. We were in the jungles. We were in a rainforest type thing. And anyway, we're going across every water crossing you hit was this little makeshift bridge thing that we had to cross. Okay, now I'm going to hand the story over to you and tell us about how your motto started at that moment.
So yes, that's a great setup, by the way. Thank you. And the trepidation of approaching these rickety bridges, and there's some pretty sharp drops from the bridges, and you take a step, and then the rest of the bridge shifts, and then you take another step, and it shifts another way, and so I had a guy behind me, and he was a student at the African Bible College at ABC in Liberia, and he just out of nowhere said, "Take courage." And that's my best Liberian accent I can give. But literally, it was
I'll translate.
Take courage in English. Yeah. So Liberian was take courage. But he would say it so quickly. And I was like, what? He's like, take courage. And everybody started saying it like, just, go for it. Be brave. So he was encouraging me with his words. And he was so confident that I could make it. And clearly people had gone before me and I knew I could. But, there's that first step, and I made it. And once I made it across, that became our mantra for the entire rest of the trip. Take courage. So it was a great way to connect with the rest of the students too. I found one of the story behind that was there used to be a student at African Bible College in Liberia that had right before finals, everybody was really stressed out. And there was just kind of like a cloud over everybody and really worried about tests and finals. And he would pick everybody up by just running around campus. Take courage, be strong, be brave, take courage. So I actually used it in my words of encouragement at one of the churches I was asked to provide words of encouragement in Liberia in my sermon that day. And it really stuck through the entire trip. So we'd be riding around on our motorcycles. We'd drive by students and they would just put their fists, take courage, and it was fun. And our whole team from the Grove, we kind of incorporated into our daily lives and activity because it really became something of it was fun because we connected with the students and everybody else and the village people and not those village people, but the actual villagers. But we always connect with them in our hearts. But we really enjoyed the part where we had that bond and connection. And on one of the final evenings, we had a big bonfire and, just take courage. It was a rally cry.
It was.
And it really motivated us too because, Kyle, I don't know if you know this about Kyle, but humidity and Kyle, dangerous, not a good mix. But it really was one of those things where we could rally around it. And we bonded over it. We connected with them as well. And it just shows you too, that little simple word, that phrase from encouraging words to get across that little bridge, the next 2 weeks, it became part of our fabric, really. And it reminded me of this one that my dad used to say, there's, you could have a gallon, a bucket full of criticism, but you have like a drop of encouragement that changes the whole color of that entire bucket. And that's all it takes. It's so simple. And you may not even realize what you're doing to help these people out, but that seed is planted. And, as we know, the whole sequoias and all that analogy, it doesn't take much, but you can continue to water that seed with the encouraging words or text or calls. It really makes a difference.
Think about how much nicer the workplace would be for people, secular or Christian, if you had a boss that went around and just sprinkled that,
It
and
changes
some
everything.
do, but
Right,
it would
right.
just make things so much more pleasant at work.
That positive reinforcement. There's that whole joke of the beatings will continue until morale improves. It's like, that's not how I manage my people, and it's not how anybody should treat anybody anyway. There's people actually, some of the high school kids that work with me, they're like, thank you for just saying nice things to us, because they hadn't been treated like that before.
Yeah.
And because of that, we just had these reviews come in from corporate and everything, and we had the highest customer satisfaction, the highest ratings, and this is all within 3 months. So it really, it's good business practices, but it's also just the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Because now these kids want to come into work, and not just the kids, the adults too that work with us. They all thrive on that.
That made me think of something. One of the nicest things one of the parents said to me when I was coaching in Mississippi that one year, at the end of the year, I mean, I had a lot of parents that didn't really like my style. They wanted me to yell at the players like the old guy did.
Yeah.
But this one mother called me. She said, "I want you to know I appreciate the way you treated my son with respect this year." You know, and I think that's it. You know, you treat him like a normal person and you encourage him, and all
it
those
goes
things.
such a long way because again, you see how people treat other people, and you're like, wow, man, please don't treat me that way. You know, you treat others like you want to be treated. It's the old adage. And I just got reminded of a story. My son was in club soccer for years, and he had a coach from Brazil. Great coach, Coach Lucas Coelho, great guy. And Coach Coelho, parents would always come up to him after games or practices and be like, get in his ear, like, why is my son starting, or why isn't he playing this? They all thought they had the next Pele. And Coach, we went out to dinner one time after practice, and you could tell he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. He's like, I just can't take it. They're like getting mean and vicious about it. And he said, in Brazil, we have a saying, and it's beautiful in Portuguese. I wish I could remember how to say it that way, but translated to English, it's, you know what, all you can do. He's like, not even Jesus could make everybody happy. So it just ties it all together. We can try so hard, and it's just making that effort is what it's really all about, because those words of encouragement can not only change somebody's day, it can change their trajectory and their whole life. And I, personally speaking, I can say that, Kyle's encouragement, I've been the last, after Liberia, Satan threw the book at me, in between jobs, in between housing situations, and I won't go into details, but I'll just tell you, because of Kyle's encouraging words and the Grove community rallying, like, now I can talk about it. And now I know I can use my experience to hopefully help others too. I mean, you guys, if you're struggling out there, talk to people, and it's okay to reach out, because I like helping people. I love helping people. I love motivating people, inspiring people. So when I'm on the other end of that, that was the hardest thing in the world for me, to accept help. But it's okay to accept help. I can tell you firsthand that it's okay, and it's the right thing to do. Jesus wants us to help each other, and that includes receiving help. So while this message of encouragement, I'm encouraging all of you, if you're needing help, to reach out. And it doesn't have to be a big ask. If you're like, hey, I just need to talk to somebody, especially nowadays. Hey, I'd love to just talk to somebody. I mean, call me, we can look me up. It's like, I love just talking with people and getting to know people, because the different stories and circumstances that we all go through will help. Again, all boats are rising with the tide. And the tide, we know the tide is low right now, but that doesn't mean it's not rising. It's just slower than normal, I think. So
the tide is high and you're moving on.
I'm moving on. There's a great version out there on YouTube. There's also a European version that my son Dane loves too. It's a little techno version of it. But.
No, not for me. Okay, well, just the last thing I want to say with Evan here is, while we were in Liberia, Evan was brilliant with the kids. So positive and uplifting, and we were in the middle of absolute poverty, and these kids were just having a ball. And he's just got one of those kind of personalities that he draws people to him. And so keep using that for God's glory and God's kingdom. And Evan, if you didn't know, which you wouldn't, because he would have been in costume, but back in the 80s, he was
90s.
Back in the 90s.
Mid-90s.
Back in the 90s, Evan was actually Sparky at ASU, running around doing push-ups and waving in front of the TV camera and all that. Yeah. So you've got the right personality for that.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Anyway, Evan, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Kyle.
So make sure and tune in next Tuesday night for our second session on encouragement. Okay, good night.
Thank you. Good night.